Hi, I'm Dave from People and Risk, and I help organisations tackle safety and risk through a specific focus on people and culture. And in this video, I want to talk about, I guess, a thing that I'm worried about, I think is happening in health and safety, but also have some ideas at the end of some little things that you can take away and potentially practice or try on to see how they might fit. So my question at the beginning, which is sort of the priming question, if you will, right, is if we think about safety and the work of safety, whatever that is, that's a really broad question, right? My question here is, can we do things in the name of safety that can unintentionally increase risk? All right? Can we do things in the name of safety that can unintentionally increase risk? I think there is. I think it happens. As I said, it's unintentional. I think it happens through natural trade-offs and consequences. I don't agree, but I accept there are people who might not believe that, who might think that, no, you can always be safer and everything we do is always good and adding value. But my experience is when I ask this question in organisations, senior leaders down to frontline are like, no, that can happen. And it can be seen as simple things like, you know, too many systems, too much signage, too many instructions, too long inductions, too much PPE. It's often the too much or too complicated type thing. Now, what I'm saying though is I accept that it comes from a well-meaning place. So by playing with this question, and I want to talk about a subset of that, the outcome here is I think the better we are at seeing it and being able to talk about it in an open and balanced way, then the better we can tackle it. Because although it's unintentional, it is increasing risk. So I want to talk about an aspect of this around power. And what I mean by that is some things we do in safety where we might think that we are empowering people, but particularly what we might be doing is disempowering them. It's the reverse or unintended consequence of it. So my question is going to start with a who question, right? So, okay. So who does this work? That's what I want to think about here. Who does the work of actually managing risk? Okay. Who does most of the work? This is not everybody, but who's carrying the bulk of the work when it comes to managing day-to-day risks, hazards, safety, whatever you want to do? You know, I prefer the word risk, but let's stick with that. Who bears the consequences if it goes wrong or isn't what we expect, or there's some, again, unintended consequences on that? Okay. So who bears that? And who has the expertise when it comes to managing risk? Now, I'm not suggesting it's one person, it's a range of people, but what I'm suggesting is it's not equal, and what we might be accidentally doing in safety is creating not only an imbalance, but an unexpected outcome. Because if I think about, well, who are the different, now I'm going to say people here, but we personify some things in safety. So what are the different entities or people involved in safety? What I'm going to do is contrast, right? So on one side here, I'm going to talk about frontline. And I'm intentionally creating a sort of a dialectic here. And on the other side over here, I want to talk about, well, there's the organisation, there's senior leaders, there's even potentially safety people. If I could work out how to spell that, it'll be all right. We've also got supervisors and managers. I also want to include, and this is, again, I've kind of done a hierarchy, it's not intentional, but I also want to include the system itself. And what I mean is, same as the organisation, we personify it and we create it, we treat it like an entity, and therefore it can have power. And basically, I guess you could potentially already start to see where I'm going here. If we think about this as a balance, I think that the bulk of this work is done by frontline. I think that they do most of the day-to-day risk management. I think they bear most of the consequences, and I think they actually have the most expertise. Now, it's not all of them, right? And there's a that sure, there is a lot of work in risk management done elsewhere apart from the front line, but it's the bulk of it. Who's carrying this load, okay? Who bears the most consequences? Sure, other people bear financial, moral, emotional, legal consequences, and same with expertise, right? There are other people that might have to have some expertise. But what's interesting is to allow frontline people to manage their risks, they need a level of expertise through capability and sort of knowledge in what they're doing, right? So it's a sliding scale. But my question is, is that where the power sits? So if we question up here and go, where does the power sit from a safety point of view? Is the power also at the front line? We ask people to be empowered, but in fact, is the power sitting over here somewhere? Is the power sitting with the organisation? The organisation sets the rules and enforces the rules. So when people, when there's a safety incident, are they more worried about the rules or about, say, getting hurt? That's the problem with life-saving rules is when I say, what is the consequence of breaching a life-saving rule? Frontline personnel rarely say, I could get hurt. Normally what they say is, I'll get in trouble, which is a systems answer or an org answer, all right? It can also be when I hear leaders and particularly safety people potentially say things like, it's my job to keep you safe. I get it. I empathize with it. I understand that level of being personally responsible for others. Okay, it happens in work relationships, it happens in families. Okay, it's my job. But there is an unintended consequence of that, which is that you are actually disempowering that person. It's my job to keep you safe. Well, hang on, what's their job? All right. And this is one of the ideas that I want to share as a tried on, right? I think in safety, what we've done is created this sort of idea that all of these people have to tell and instruct and supervise. It's our job to tell them how to be safe, even though they're carrying all the bulk of it. So it creates this discrepancy, if you will. And what they experience is, you're telling me I'm responsible, but if something goes wrong, all you care about is the signature. You're telling me I'm responsible, but then there's 50 signs up and I get in trouble for not following one of them. You're telling me I'm responsible, but then say to me, make sure you've signed it, otherwise we don't believe it happened. It's the system, it's the power that goes to these things. You're telling me I'm responsible, and I say to you, as a frontline person, there's no way we can prevent all incidents. And a senior leader says, well, you just don't believe enough, you're out. And then the next person's like, well, I'm not sticking my head up. They're telling you, and then we go, no, it's my job. And I think, I want to say I get that it's probably accidentally. I think it's this, we've created this wave or this momentum in safety that's what we've got to do. I mean, for a lot of safety people, it's like, what else do you do if you're not telling people how to be safe? What's your job, right? Which comes back to a broader issue of what's our identity. So all I'm suggesting is a subtle shift in language. What if we said it's our job to help? What if we were a helping industry? Our job is to help that person manage risk. How do we do that? Sometimes it might be through saying, here are the rules we expect you to follow, or here's the resources you need. But it's a subtle shift. So I'm not saying it's a free-for-all and people get to do whatever they want, but it's a subtle shift. Does this system help? How does this system help? How does this rule help? Sometimes we help people by saying this is a non-negotiable, but it's still about risk. It's still, we're helping you manage your risks. And it in fact is about giving them agency and giving them power. If somebody thinks that your rules are silly, that's great. They have the power or the agency to not follow them and deal with the consequences of that. So it's not a consequence-free process, but with accountability should come responsibility, which power is related to that. Imagine being told you're going to be fully accountable, but having no power over what you do, right? That creates that discrepancy and it creates some cultural problems there. So my question is, what if we reframed everything to how can I help, not how do I make you safe or how do I tell you to be safe? And I accept that for some people you might already be thinking that, but as a whole systems organization leader approach, I'm not sure it's sort of there. And it does shift the whole organization. It's like taking the org chart and turning it upside down and saying, we think these people are at the front line of the way we manage risk. And what if the whole organization was now a servant to that person? That'd be an interesting shift. Welcome any comments, queries, feedback, whatever. It's always a bit of fun, but it's something to think about as one of these unintended consequences. Thanks for listening.